I'm sorry. So we're recording. We're on 33A1, Lamed Gimel, Amid Aleph. We're up to Mishnah, 5th Mishnah. So again, we're in, there's Marvin. We're on Lamed Gimel, Amid Aleph. In the back, it's 33A1. And we're up to the 5th Mishnah. So again, Misha Zacha B'machta, the Kohen who won the privilege to use the shovel, he was going to shovel the coals off of the outer Mizbeach that was in the Azara, in the courtyard, to bring it into the Kodesh, into the inner area where the golden Mizbeach was. So, Natra Machtas HaKesef, he would take a silver shovel for this, because that was more durable than the gold one. So it says he would take a silver shovel, V'ala l'rosh Mizbeach, he would go up to the top of the Mizbeach, Upinas HaGecholim Elach Ve'elach, and he would scoop away the outer coals that were all burnt up, and he wants to get the ones from the middle, the ones that were piping hot, that were right in the middle. The chasa, and he scooped out some of those inner coals. Yarad ve'eran l'toch shel zav. And now he would transfer those coals from the silver shovel, which was more durable. That was what he used to, knock away the fiery ones. And now he's got the select ones. And he would transfer them l'soch zav into a golden shovel, which was like Ma'al and Bakodesh, bringing more dignity to it. And it says, Nispazer mimenu kab gechalim. And when he transferred it from the silver shovel was much larger than the golden one. So when he transferred it from the silver shovel to the golden shovel, that caused that about a kav's worth of gechalim, of coals, would spill out onto the floor in the Beis Hamikdash. Now you have to remember the Kohanim walked around barefoot. So that was a hazard. So they had to take care of that. So it says, so another Kohen would come by and sweep the coals that fell on the ground into the Amma. That was like a drainage canal that existed. That was how they would clean out the Beis Hamikdash from the blood and whatnot that was there. They would squirt around a lot of water, like squeegee, sponge, like what they do in Israel, and they would put it into this drainage canal. So another Kohen would come and sweep the coals that were on the floor into the drainage canal, and that would prevent the Kohanim from hurting themselves, from getting burnt. A Mishnah continues, and it says, V'Shabbos, what did they do on Shabbos? You couldn't sweep the coals into the drainage canal because that would extinguish them, and that would be a malacha on Shabbos. So what did they do? They didn't sweep them into the drainage canal. They put a special copper pot on top of them to shield that no Kohanim should step on them, because you would have coals on the floor that could be dangerous. So on Shabbos, that's what they would do. They would put this upside down special copper pot on top of those poles. So again, we're on 33A. 33A, if you're using the art score 33A2, we're towards the bottom in middle of Mishnah Hay. It says, now this copper pot that we just spoke about, what other use would it have? It was a very large vessel. It would hold a lesech. A lesech was a certain amount of measure, which they say was pretty large, 15 sa'ah or 90 kabin, so it's pretty large. And attached to this copper pot, there were two chains. And it's going to tell you, what did they use this copper pot for normally? The copper pot had like a ball-like bottom. So when they would use this pot, when it was time for Hotzos Hadeshen, when the ashes on top of the Mizbeach became too much and they needed to transfer those ashes, take them out of the Beis Hamikdash to deposit them outside Yerushalayim, they would use this copper pot for it. So when they filled it up with ashes, so one Kohen would walk down the ramp of the Mizbeach pulling on the chain, because remember the chain had a rounded bottom. One Kohen would pull the chain to kind of pull it down the ramp. And another Kohen would hold a second chain from above it on the ramp to stabilize it, to stop this copper pot from just rolling over and ashes getting all over. So he's just telling us what the physical makeup of this pot looked like. Now the Mishnah continues and it says, what was this copper pot used for in the Beis Hamikdash? It says there were three uses. There was three uses for this copper pot. Number one, like we just said in our Mishnah, that on Shabbos, when they would transfer, on Shabbos morning, when they would transfer the coals to burn the kataras from the silver shovel to the gold shovel, which was smaller, some coals would fall on the floor. They couldn't sweep them into the drainage canal on Shabbos because that would extinguish them. So they put the copper pot on top of them to stop other Kohanim from stepping on them. That was one usage. That's the first use. The second one, the ala sheretz. Let's say they found on Shabbos, they found a dead sheretz let's say a dead mouse or something in the courtyard of Beis Hamikdash, it was muksa, so they couldn't pick it up and get it out of there, but they didn't want anyone to step on it to become tamei, so they would put this copper pot on top of it as well. And also, Moridim Bo Asadeshen Me'al Gabim Mizbeach, is that, and the main use of this pot was on a daily basis, whenever it became necessary to remove the excess ashes from the Mizbeach, they would put it in that pot, and that's what we said, there was the two chains to stabilize it when they were taking it down the ramp of the Mizbeach. All right, Mishnah 6, Mishnah Vav. So what happens? Now the Kohanim have the shovel that is a gold shovel filled with coals that they're going to need to enter into the Kodesh section to put on the Mizbeach, on the golden Mizbeach to burn the Ketores. So what happens next? So again, we're on 33a and we're up to Mishnah 6. Mishnah 6. So let's see, Mishnah Vav there. So it says as follows. Hagiu ben ulam lemizbeach. When there's two Kohanim, so you have one Kohen who's carrying the shovel with the coals, and the other Kohen is carrying the golden ladle that has the Ketores, the incense spices in it. So it says as follows. When they got to the area, Hagiu ben ulam lemizbeach, when they got to the area between the ulam, between the antechamber and the Mizbeach, natal echad es hamagrefa. Another Kohen would take a magrefa. Magrefa was a tool that looked like a shovel, and it says v'zarka bein ulam mizbeach, and it would throw it on the ground between the ulam, between the antechamber and the mizbeach. And the whole point of that was to make a racket, to make a lot of noise. It was like hitting a gong. Why? Why? So it says, it was so loud that people outside the Beis Hamikdash, if they were in the middle of conversation, like they had to ask their friend to repeat themselves because it made such a loud gong when that magrefa tool would hit the ground that they would have to ask their friends to repeat themselves. So basically, this was a way of sending a signal that they were about to do the Ketores. Why was this necessary? Who were they trying to signal? So the Mishnah continues. This served three functions. By throwing the magrefa tool and letting everybody know that they were about to do the Ketores, it served three functions. What were they? Number one, Kohen sheshomeas kola, any Kohen who was standing outside the Azara, when they heard the noise of that magrefa, like a gong, when they heard that, they know that their brothers, the other Kohanim, were preparing, they would soon enter the Heichal to bow down, to prostrate themselves. Why? Because after the Ketores was brought, any Kohen, even the ones who did not perform the ceremony, but any Kohen who was in the Beis Hamikdash was allowed to come into the Kodesh section and bow down. So let's say some Kohen was outside and he didn't know that that was what was going on. He heard that noise. If he wanted to get in on this, he would know he had to hustle to get into the Beis Hamikdash. He would hustle, he would run to get there. Number two, Uben Levi Shushamei Eskola, any Levite who heard that sound of the magrefa, that tool hitting the ground, the big gong. So what did he know that told him? Now he knows that his friends, the other Leviim, he knows that they were going to the orchestra. They were going to the Duchan where they were going to play their instruments and they were going to sing. So if, let's say, a Levi was running late, he's outside the Beis Hamikdash, now he hears that noise and he knows he's got to hustle to get to the Duchan where he wants to be in the choir or he wants to be in the orchestra. He would hustle to get there. Rosh Mamad, and the third item that would signal is Rosh Mamad, the head of the Mamad, when he heard this noise, he would post Tamei Kohanim at the eastern entrance to the Temple Mount. What is that? So some of the Mefarshim, they have different ideas of explaining this. And they say as follows. I saw two ideas. It was understandable that there would be some Kohanim that for one reason or another, it was their week to be on duty, but they couldn't perform their duties because they had become Tamei. They had become ritually impure. So there was this one who was in charge would say to them, okay, you can't serve today, but you should stand at attention at the entrance to the Beis Hamikdash without entering to let everyone know the reason why you're not serving is because you're Tamei. What was the point of that? So the Mefarshim offered two reasons. Number one was to remove any kind of thoughts of Maris Ayin. People may suspect, hey, why is that Kohen not on duty today? I know this was his week. Maybe he's lazy. Maybe he overslept. So by standing there in that gateway, he was sending the message, I'm not lazy. I didn't oversleep. I wish I could be there. But what could I do? I'm Tamei. I have to wait till the evening. After I go to the mikveh, wait till the evening till I could be there. So it was a way of letting everyone know explaining why I'm not at work today. It's not because I'm lazy, I didn't sleep late, but rather because I'm tummy. That's one idea. A second idea was it was almost like some kind of a way to shame them. It's like saying you should have been more careful. You should have been looking where you're going, not to step on anything, whatever it was. And it was almost like it was a way of saying that, okay, you're tamei, and some of it could have been your fault. Obviously, there's ways a guy could become tamei and have nothing to do with his fault, but sometimes it could have been the fellow was careless. So it was a way of saying, it was almost like a way of shaming them and saying, you really would like to be working in the Beis Hamikdash today, but you can't. You know why? Because I was a klutz and I became tamei. So that's how some of them learned that. So it's two different ideas. All right, let's continue. That concluded that parak, the fifth parak. We're going to start now the sixth parak, and we'll learn a couple of the mishnayos in that sixth parak. So let's see. We're still on Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph. We're at halfway in the page, and we're at Mishnah Aleph, the sixth parak. And now it's going to talk about how the Ketores was actually brought. It says, Heichelu olim b'malos ulam. So those two Kohanim, the one who's carrying the coals and the one who's carrying the incense, they start to ascend the stairs that go first into the antechamber. That was the first stairway, that staircase that they would ascend. But before they entered, so there was two things that had to happen. We learned in an earlier parak that a Kohen had a job earlier to clear off the ashes and to clean off the mizbeach, the golden mizbeach, from yesterday's Ketorah service. And he put all those ashes in a golden canister and left them in there. So at this point, it says, the Kohen who had the job a little bit earlier in the morning to sweep off those ashes and put them in the golden container, and then had left them in the Kodesh section, menorah, and also the other Kohen who had a job to clean out the menorah and put the ashes from the wick and the leftover oil in a special container and left it in there. Those two Kohanim would first enter into the Kodesh section before the ones with the coals for the Ketores and the Ketores itself. And it says, the first one to go in was the Kohen whose job it was to clean off their Mizbeach. He took the golden basket, which it was sitting there, containing all the ashes from yesterday. He prostrated himself on the ground, bowed down, and he left. And then the Kohen whose job it was to clear out the menorah from yesterday. So again, he had gone in there and put the ashes and the leftover oil, he had gone and put it in a golden vessel. So it says, Nichnas, he goes in, Umatza shtei neros mizrachim dolkim. He still may have found that the two easternmost candles or lamps on the menorah were still burning. And if that's the case, what did he do? Medashen as a Mizrachi, he would clear out the ash from the most eastern ones, meaning he would extinguish it. If it was still burning, the most eastern lamp, he would extinguish it, clean out the wick, clean out the oil, and then the one that was to the west of that, meaning the second lamp, he would leave that one burning. Why? So in the evening, when they would light the menorah, it would be lit from that one that was still burning, and then they would extinguish it once the others had been lit, and then they would refill it, put in a new wick, and light that one. So it says, later in the afternoon, they would use that one that was still burning to ignite the other lamps of the menorah. Matzah shekavu, but let's say when they came in, it had already gone out, because they said specifically at the towards the end of the Beis Hamikdash that Klal Yisrael wasn't zocha, they didn't merit to have that miracle that they were always burning. So let's say he came in and he saw that it was already out. So then midashno, so then he would clean it all out now. All those last two remaining lamps, clear out the wicks and the remaining oil that was in there. And then what would they do in the evening when it came time to light the menorah? What did they light it from? Because remember, there was nothing burning. So it says they would light it from the mizbeach that was used for the olah. Meaning that's the outer mizbeach that was there. Remember, we said there was always a flame that was going to be burning there. One of the purposes of the flame was, if they needed to, they would light from the menorah, they would transfer that flame over there. Not alasakuz, mimala shnia. Then they took that golden jug that had been placed on the second stair by the menorah, and it says vishtachava v'yatza. And that Kohen would now bow down, prostrate himself on the floor, and now he would leave. Now that those two Kohanim were finished with their duties, and that the ashes from the Mizbeach, the inner Mizbeach, and the ashes from the menorah have been removed, now it was time for the Ketores team to do their job. So the Mishnah says as follows, Mishnah 2. So it's Mishnah Beis now on Lamed Gimel Amid Aleph. So we're up to Mishnah Beis. So Mishnah Beis says, what happens next? Mishnah Zacha b'machta. The Kohen whose job who had won the privilege to bring the coals on a shovel in there. So it says, Savar es hagachalim al gabe mizbeach. He would deposit those coals in a heap on top of the golden mizbeach. And now it was like a little mountain. But then he would flatten it out. In other words, first he dumped some, and it's like a heap, and then he would kind of flatten them out to make it that it covers more ground on the top. He would bow down, prostrate himself, and then he would leave. So that coin's left. Who's left now? So the coin with the golden ladle and with the ketoris inside, and we'll soon see he had an assistant. So it was really two kohanim now. The Mishnah says, Mishnah Gimel, the third Mishnah now, Mishnah Zacha b'ketoris, the Kohen who had won the privilege to carry in the ketoris and then to actually put it on the mizbeach. So it says, Hayanotelas abazech mitoch hakaf. He would take the spoon that contained the ketoris, the incense spices, he would take it out from inside of that ladle, v'nosno le'oavo le'karvo, and he would give that spoon that's holding the ketoris, he would give it to who he had chosen. In other words, it was up to him to choose a friend or a family member who had to have been a Kohen from that mishmar to join him inside. He would give it to him to hold. Let's say some of the incense had spilled out of the spoon into the ladle. That friend, in other words, the Kohen whose job it was to put the ketoris on his back would now cup his hands together like this, put the two hands together, and the friend would take the spoonful of ketoris and dump it into his hands, along with any of the ketoris that had spilled out into the ladle. So now you have the Kohen whose job it was, who had won the right to bring the ketoris. He's got his hands together like this. He's holding the ketoris together in his two hands. And his friend, his job had been to put the spoonful of ketoris and the ladle, anything that had spilled out of the spoon, into his hands. His job is done. And now we have the Kohen who's holding it in his hands. It was more covered. It was more respect to put onto the mizbeach with the hands rather than from the utensil. So he's got it in his hands. What does he do next? It says, the Mishnah continues, and the other Kohanim, they gave him a serious lesson here, that when it comes time to burning the ketoris was flammable. So now remember, you have the Kohen, he's standing right in front of the golden mizbeach, and he has to put the ketoris, dump the ketoris in his hands onto the mizbeach. They gave him a very practical hint how to do this without burning his hands. So the Mishnah says, what did they teach him to do? Don't dump it right on the coals right in front of you, because then what's going to happen? It's going to shoot up the flame. You're going to burn your hands. Don't do that. Instead, what should you do? Reach over the coals, go to the back of the coals and start dumping the ketoris out on the back of the coals, and then move your hands forward. So in other words, as it falls on the coals, the flame will shoot up, but you've already moved your hands closer to you, away from that. So as the flames are shooting up, you won't burn your hands. That's what he says there. Hischil miradad. So he says he would spread out it out evenly, the yotze, and then he would leave that area. Meaning is that he would pull his hands back away from where he's depositing it. So as the flames shoot up, his hands are out of there, and he will not burn his hands in the process, won't singe off all the hair on his hands or anything like that. And then it says, Lo haya maktir, and he would not, that job, the Kohen whose job it was to deposit the incense on the coals, he would not do that ad shemamuna amar lo haktir, until the mamuna, the one who was the master of ceremonies, the Kohen who was the master of ceremonies, who was standing outside, would yell, give an announcement, Maktir, now it's time to do it. What was he waiting for? He had to wait. There was not supposed to be anyone left in the room other than him. Not just nobody left in the room, but no Kohanim between the Mizbeach and the entrance there. So he was waiting for the word. In other words, he had it in his hand, his assistant had put it in his hands. So now he's waiting. He didn't want to turn his back on it. So he's facing forward. So he has to hear the announcement from the Mamuna, from the master of ceremonies, that now it's a good time, meaning everyone, the other Kohanim have left the room, you're in there by yourself, and also outside, there's no Kohanim standing between the Mizbeach and the open doorway. It's supposed to be a straight shot. So he would call out to him, Hakter, now is the time to burn the incense, deposit those spices on the coals. And now it says, V'imhaya Kohen Gadol. If let's say the Kohen who was doing this, because as we'll see soon, the Kohen Gadol had a free license. Anything the Kohen Gadol wanted to do, he was allowed to step in and say, I've got it. In other words, even though another Kohen had won the lottery, won the privilege to do something, the Kohen Gadol always had the ability to trump that one and to say, I'd like to do this. So if let's say it was the Kohen Gadol who was going to be burning that day, he would address him a little bit more respectfully. He wouldn't just call out Hakter. Rather, Imaya Kohen Gadol, if it was a Kohen Gadol, Hamamun Amarlo, the master of ceremonies, would say to him, Ishi, my master, Kohen Gadol, Hakter. So it's like saying, sir, like he's addressing an officer. He was addressing someone of a higher station. He would call out, my master, the Kohen Gadol. Now is the time to put it down with a little bit more respect. And then the Kohen who had done that, the Kohen who had burned the Ketaras, he would bow down, he would prostrate himself, and then he would leave. This brings us to the end of Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph. So we are now at Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis at the top. So God willing, we'll continue tomorrow evening. So I hope tomorrow I'll shoot out an email again. We're going to start our drive back from Chicago tomorrow afternoon. So I hope tomorrow evening, maybe we'll shoot for 9 o'clock. We'll try to do the same, but I'll send an email out just to make certain that we've got it. We'll do some learning tomorrow night, and we're getting very close to finishing the Masechta, and that'll enable us to make a beautiful siyum on Shabbos. All right, Yasher Koach, I thank you for